6th grade, you are going to be drawing portraits for your next project. So the online portion of this lesson is going to be to watch this video and then complete the attached Google form that has just a few questions related to this video. And then in our Zoom classes that will be during your regular scheduled art time, we will meet and we will be drawing portraits together. And when we're drawing portraits, we're going to be using proportion. So we're going to talk about what exactly that means here in this video. So first of all, let's back that up and say, what is a portrait? A portrait is simply an artwork of a person's head and sometimes their shoulders. A portrait can be of anyone. A self-portrait is an artwork an artist makes of their own head and shoulders. These are both portraits of drawn by famous artists. And you may, for this project, draw a self-portrait, but I, in my experience, have found that some students feel very uncomfortable drawing self-portraits, and that's fine. You can draw an imagined person. And so basically you're just trying to draw a portrait of a human face, neck, and shoulders is what we will be drawing. Okay, so feel free to make that a self-portrait. But it doesn't have to be. Okay, so self-portraits. These are both self-portraits by the artist Vincent van Gogh. Artists often do self-portraits. It is fun to see how they change their style and look as they get older, right? So you can kind of see how Van Gogh is changing his style greatly in between these two different portraits. Okay, so what is proportion? Basically, proportion is comparing one thing to something else. You probably have learned about proportions in math class, right? Fractions are proportions. So you're comparing the top number in the fraction to the bottom number in the fraction. And you probably never thought that you would be talking about fractions in art class or proportions in art class, right? Comparing the size of one thing to the size of another thing. But it really does relate, right? We use proportion all the time in art, especially when you're drawing something. And so we're comparing the parts of the face, right? The size of different parts of the face to the size of other parts of the face, because when they all match up and they make sense in relation to one another, then you have a face that looks realistic. So proportion and the golden mean. Since ancient Greek times, mathematicians and artists have used the golden mean or the golden ratio as a way of understanding proportion. In mathematical terms, this is also known as pi. Artists use the golden mean to create visually pleasing proportions in their art. So you can see there's that golden ratio, and it is that kind of swirl that you can see there on the right in that picture. And so Hokusai, a very famous Japanese artist that we learned about at the beginning of the year when we were talking about landscapes, this is the great wave that Hokusai created, right? And you can see that he also used the golden mean in creating that. So it could be related to portraits, or it could be really related to anything. So these famous artworks also use the concept of the golden mean. You know, this doesn't fit just anything. But it does fit a lot of things. So proportion in portraits. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo studied anatomy, which is the study of organisms like humans, and the concept of the golden mean to develop some basic proportion guidelines for the human form. They were really into science, math, and art, so you might not have ever thought of a connection between those, but there definitely is one. So if you guys want to watch somebody else draw a face in correct proportion, you can totally just Google that on your own. I don't think that these links would work on this video, but I am going to draw a portrait in proportion with you guys in your Zoom. Okay, we will be doing that together, and we're going to be using this image to help us draw, or something very similar to this, to help you draw a face in correct proportion. And so when we're doing this, I'm going to zoom in here, we will be drawing those like crosshairs, the vertical line and horizontal line, and then a whole bunch of other lines to help us draw the face in the correct proportion, okay? And there are some really common mistakes that people make whenever they try to draw a portrait in proportion. And I want to tell you, boys and girls, that drawing portraits is like really, really difficult. And it's not something that I feel like is my best, that I am the best at. I definitely am not. I'm working on my portrait skills just like you guys will be as well. So all I ask is that you do your best. Sometimes kids really beat themselves up for what their portraits look like, but we're just gonna have fun and we're just gonna do our best. And if you feel like it looks terrible by the end, that's okay. As long as you're trying your hardest, that's all I'm worried about, okay? And so here's another one of those proportions for the portrait that you could use. There's tons of them out there, right? Here's another one. Here's another one.